Today is April 16th, 2008, and we are at Elgin Academy interviewing for the Veterans History Project. Today I'm interviewing Mr. Robert Kwatick. Mr. Kwatick, can you tell me your birth date?
Yes, 3/11/1930.
The people attending this interview are Mr. Robert Kwatick, John Fleener from the Elgin Academy running the camera, and I am Sarah Sabo from the Gail Borden Public Library. The Gail Borden Public Library and Elgin Academy are in cooperation for the Veterans History Project. Mr. Kwatick, can you tell me what war you served in?
Korean War.
And what was your branch of service?
Army.
And what was your rank?
At the end, Sergeant First Class.
So what does everybody go in as? If you were Sergeant at
Well,
the end?
I was a member of the 44th Infantry Division. Now, you got rank when were you in the, excuse me, when you were in the National Guard. But then to keep it, they suggested that you go to a service school. So actually, I went in as a sergeant.
And then you became, at the end, a Sergeant First Class.
Yes,
okay.
That's right.
Okay. And can you tell me what type of work you went in? I mean, you go through basic training. What were you training to do?
Okay, I was training to be in food service. I was a mess sergeant in the National Guard, and I went to mess sergeant school. They suggested that if we attended a service school, our opportunity of keeping this job when we got active duty was much better. So that's why I went to the school.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
Well, I enlisted in the National Guard, and then the National Guard was activated, called an active duty.
And what year was that?
1952 was called an active duty, but I attended the service school from November of 1951 through mid-January 1952.
So when would you have been shipped to Korea?
When did I go to Korea?
Mm-hmm.
In August of 1952. I'd like to add something there, that while I was in the service school at Fort Sheridan, I met a French-Canadian nurse who came from Canada to go to Northwestern to get her degree in nursing and was working at the Evanston Hospital. And that's where we met. And so I shipped out from Illinois to Camp Cook, California, which is now the Vandenberg Air Base. And she come out there in May, and we were married May 8th, 1952.
So would you have left for Korea from Camp Cook?
Yes.
And then where was the next stop?
The next stop was in Japan. And then from there I went to Korea.
And where in Korea what was your first stop in Korea?
Busan.
And that's in the north?
South.
South, okay.
South, yes. But I went there to Busan, but then I was assigned a mess sergeant in the engineer construction group, and it was up in the hills. We were living in tents, cooking in tents, and my supply was another tent. So that was north of Busan, probably 100 miles.
When you went into the National Guard, where were you living at the time?
In LaSalle, Illinois.
Why did you join the National Guard?
Well, we joined the National Guard because if we went to a 2-hour meeting, we got a day's pay, and after 3 months, we got a check. And mainly we got into it was, quite frankly, we got a check was for beer money. And that was about it. We never figured we would be in the service.
Oh, okay.
Because, World War II had ended just a short time before that. But they got us for Korea when the war broke out there.
Oh, that's interesting. So Korea really was not on your mind or on anybody's horizon when you joined the National Guard.
No,
you weren't thinking...
Definitely not.
No, okay. Interesting. Do you recall, well, I should say, since you joined the National Guard, why did you pick the branch of service that you joined?
Well, because that was the only thing that was available.
Oh, okay.
It was the 44th Infantry Division, which was an infantry division in Illinois.
you recall your first days in service?
First days in service?
Yeah, do you have to go through basic training for National Guard duty?
Well, no, not actually. We didn't go through basic training. We just got in, and we got in, and I was a cook, and and then later a mess sergeant. But no, we didn't have basic training.
At any time, did they put you through any sort of basic training?
Oh well, yeah, we had some. We would go to camp for 2 weeks in the summertime, and then we had training. Mm-hmm. We had fire weapons, and we had a crawl under barbed wire and that type of thing like that. And went on bivouac. And
what is bivouac?
Well, that's where you move out into the woods and things,
okay.
and they do different things. And of course, my job was to feed them. So we cooked on field ranges, sometimes in the back of a truck, sometimes it was on the ground, but that was about it.
So tell me about feeding them. I mean, how did you learn how to do that? Obviously, you're not cooking for 2 people. You were cooking for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, I was when I was going to high school, I worked at Starbuck Lodge in the kitchen, and I was washing dishes. But then one of the chefs kind of liked me. He said, "You want me to make salad?" So I was making salad. Anyway, that's how I get into food service, basically.
So when you get into the National Guard, you must have told them this, that you had this kind of background or
yes,
experience,
I did.
and they snatched you up for that.
Yeah, well, sometimes if you're a truck driver, they'll make you a cook. If you're a cook, they'll make you a truck driver. That's the way they work sometimes in the Army. But
so then, without having that traditional boot camp experience, do you remember anything about like your instructors or that you can share?
Well, yeah, I remember. I don't remember the name of the instructors, but I do remember when I went to mess sergeant school. Because then we had a regular. It was an 8-week course, and I remember a master sergeant that was. I don't recall his name, but he was one of the instructors. And we had another sergeant first class, and then there was a second lieutenant, who was sort of the commander of the group there.
So once you shipped, well, I should back up and say, before going to Korea, where did you did some training in Illinois, and then you got shipped to California.
Yes.
Was California more like a staging area before you went out?
Yes. What the 44th Division was 2/3 strength when it went to California, and then it was filled up with draftees and regular Army. And then instead of the 44th Division as a whole shipping out to Korea or to Germany, we went on levies, they called. And it was, I ended up going to Korea. Some of them ended up going to Germany. If I could have went to Germany, why, I could have brought my wife with me, which would have been nice because she speaks French fluently. But anyway, that's the way it worked out. I ended up going to Korea.
And so you landed in Busan. Tell me exactly, if you can, where did you go then throughout the Korean War? What were...
Okay. From there, I was sent as a mess sergeant, as I said, about 100 miles north, in the hills. And like I said, we lived in a tent, cooked in a tent. And the food advisor, warrant officer, came there, and I guess he liked something I did, and he said, "My food service specialist is rotating back to the States. Would you like the job?" I said, "You bet I would," because I knew I'd be living in some kind of metal building, and then I was sent to Busan. From there, I ran a ration breakdown for about a month before this other food service specialist was sent back to the States. Ration breakdown is where you pick up the food and you bring it into a building, and I mean break it down into the amount of people that it's going to, and then they come in their trucks and pick it up and take it back. My main job as a food service specialist, being attached to the engineers, was to make sure that the right amount of food was at the right time and the right place. I was also a member of the menu planning board for U.S. forces in Korea. And there was while Korea itself at that time, there was a lot of illness and that in people lived there. And anyway, we were feeding 4,500 calories per day. And with hydroponics, I don't know if you know what hydroponics are. Okay. Hydroponics were grown in Japan and sent there. So that was in addition to the 4,500 calories a day, because you didn't have it all the time.
So how many guys would you have been feeding every day?
200 to 250.
3 meals a day?
Yes, yes.
And you had specified menus that you had to feed them, or?
Well, yeah, we had a specified menu, and it was up to the mess sergeant's job to write the menu out, and anything on the right-hand column, any additions that he wanted to put, he would add in there. One of the things that when we were there, when we were planning the menu, so many of us were asking for turkey. Well, we started getting turkey. We got turkey, and we got turkey, and we got more turkey. And anyway, let me back off a little bit on that. On the menu planning, it was a doctor in charge, and of course, if we're not balanced diet, he'd say, "Well, wait a minute, guys, we got to add a vegetable here and stuff like that." But anyway, the turkey we got was a lot. One particular mess hall, we had roast turkey on the menu, and they got like 40 or larger pound toms, big ones, and the mess sergeant shouldn't have tried to roast them that big. He should have fricassee or something like that. But anyway, I remember standing outside the chow line, and the PFC come out, and it looked like he had the leg of a dog, and he threw it in the garbage can. And I said, "What's wrong with your food, soldier?" And he said, "How do they get those turkeys over at Flyman Squadron Formation? I couldn't get a bite off the son of a gun." And anyway, then we went in, the warrant officer and myself, and we talked to the mess sergeant and said, we realize the call for roast turkey, but, if a bird that big, you should have tried something else. Nobody would have said anything. However, also, if he didn't know that you could take those big birds and you could put clean potato sacks on them and keep pouring water on it to keep the moisture, and it would have made them better also. And
so you would have learned all of that in mess sergeant school?
Yes.
Yeah, you got all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So what would be like a sample menu for dinner? What would you have?
Well, simple. Okay, you have turkey, obviously. Yeah.
So it's turkey.
Turkey, and you'd have potatoes now, but the potatoes were powdered potatoes. Okay, and a vegetable, and maybe 2 vegetables, and dessert of some type. And I remember once one of our cooks baked the pies, and the first sergeant, they were a little runny, and the mess sergeant said, the first sergeant rather said, "It's a long time since I had a drink of pie." Anyway, but he ate it just the same.
That's good. So obviously running the mess hall, did you see combat, or where did combat fit into what you were doing?
Well, combat was north of where we were. Okay, combat was north.
So what were your engineers doing then? Are they building bridges?
They were construction engineers, building, and now, in fact, this particular medal that I have here, ribbon rather, is the one that's encircled in gold. It was the president of South Korea, Syngman Rhee, gave the unit that I was in commendation for building a bridge across the Han River. And so they did building. Now, one of the things they did too, now, being construction engineers, sometimes it was necessary, if they had a big job, to let's say they're going to take a couple squads, platoon, maybe sometimes even half the company to go and work on this job. Well, my job was to make sure that the food got to where it belonged. So I would go there into the orderly room, get the present for duty strength.
Get the what?
Present for duty strength.
Okay.
That would be, now let's say they had 50 men. Well, I'll give you an example. They were doing a blacktop road around Busan Harbor. And they couldn't do it daytime because of all the trucks. It was too dusty. So they're doing this at night. And so these men then were going there and working nights to do it. And of course you had to take a meal out to them. And so you took their breakfast. Well, their job was to come back, go to bed, get up for lunch. Well, they weren't doing that. They get in line again for breakfast. Consequently, they were way overdrawing their rations.
Oh.
And so my job was to report back to the warrant officer, which I did, and how many rations that were overdrawn. And then the commanding officer, the colonel, called me in. He said, Sergeant, I want you to find out if they're allowed to draw those extra rations. Well, I knew they weren't, but I wasn't going to say that to the colonel, so I said, okay, I went to S4, which is supply at the highest level. And they said, no, in the Army or in the service, you're allowed one meal a day. I mean, one ration is 3 meals a day. And he said, I want you to go back and talk to them and tell them there was a major, he was the commanding officer of the battalion. I want you to tell them that they can't draw those rations. And he said, in fact, he said, you can tell them that the colonel said, if they continue to draw them, you might end up paying for some of them. So I really didn't want to go back, but I had to go back. And I went back, and went back to the order room, and the major was in his office. He come on, and steam was coming out of his ears. He was so upset. And he said, Sergeant, who are you to tell me that we can not draw or not, to draw the ration? And of course, you're a non-commissioned officer, and you're dealing with a field grade officer. And I said, well, does the major understand that the colonel sent me here to explain this to you? And he said, well, I don't care. We're going to continue to draw the ration. So I write down, Major so-and-so said they were going to continue to draw the ration. Well, I started for the door, and he said, hold it. I said, can we talk non-commissioned officer to a field grade officer? Yeah, fine. I said, we have extra food in the ration breakdown, which is here in your compound. So I said, if you have something like that happen, if you let us know, we can give you extra food. But please, for your sake, don't put it on paper. So it worked out pretty good. We were good friends after that.
So when you say they had one ration a day, one ration is breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They
That's
can't
right.
have 2 breakfasts. They can't have 2 lunches.
That's right.
That's right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they wanted to come off of night duty after they ate their breakfast and not have to get up for lunch. They wanted to sleep through lunch.
Well, no, they wanted to get back in line again for breakfast.
But then not have to wake up for lunch.
Oh, well, that I don't,
yeah.
It's hard to say.
Because they've been working all night.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
How interesting.
Yeah, well, that's the way it worked out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
A little bit of Army bureaucracy then, huh?
Yeah, well, yeah, and actually, a lot of these things that were done, well, I can honestly say I believe the sergeants really ran the Army, because a lot of this stuff you never put on paper. You could get extra things you could accumulate, and well, I'll give an example. I knew that there was a boat that came up from Japan every day that had ice that you could use. I mean, because you couldn't use the ice made in the Korean water because it was too polluted. Well, anyway, it was ice on the boat, but I needed an ice house. So I checked around, and I finally found, talking to one of the mess sergeants in the firefighting company, he said, there's a big reefer, homemade, up with the evacuation hospital up on the ridge going around Busan. Well, he said, this thing weighs 40 or 50 tons. So I went to the motor pool sergeant, and I said, Sergeant, I need a low boy and a crane.
A low boy is what?
That is a
flatbed truck?
It's a flatbed, but it's low.
Okay.
Okay, in the center part.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, that's fine. He said, he said, I could use some little cans of Vienna weenies and stuff like that, sea rations. I said, fine, we understand each other. So when I went up, I measured the size of this big reefer, and come back, and I had about a dozen Korean laborers that worked at the ration breakdown, and had to build a platform using 12 by 12, big heavy timber, and got it up, got the flooring in, cut a hole in the side of it, and then I went to the motor pool sergeant, and I said, okay, I'm ready. So he called his low boy and the crane in. It had to be like a monthly inspection, which took some time. But anyway, so we went up and picked it up and come back and set it in place. And this major, his office, I'm talking about the major before I had a little conversation with, was like maybe 150 feet from there. Well, he saw all this going on, so I had a corporal that was in charge of the laborers, and I said, I want you to take this. I had an ice bucket. Take it over to the major and give it to him and tell him it's with my compliments. If he wants more ice, you could use this in your drinks.
Ice was probably like gold, right?
Oh, yeah,
a cold drink was probably like such a treat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
You've alluded a couple times to the fact of the conditions of Korea at the time. Obviously, the water was not drinkable. The people had horrible nutrition. What else were your impressions about what
the
you were
impressions
seeing?
of Korea, the average life expectancy at that time was about 38 years old. And that was because of the childhood diseases that they would die from. And, you know, so if a kid could grow up over there, he'd be one strong son of a gun over here, you know. And so that was what it was. And then I remember when I was in Busan, and we were built at the it was a Busan University building, and I would see them come down, and they had a cart, you know, two-wheel cart, with a big piece of beef on it, just covered in flies. He'd stop, and the one would come out, he'd cut a piece off, you know, and so, you know, with that type of stuff, plus the fact that in Korea, they used all human excretion for fertilizer. And so, you know, that would go right back into their body. This is why we couldn't grow any vegetables or anything there. So.
So supplied-wise, you got supplied from the United States and then also from Japan. I mean, where did your stuff come from? If you
Well,
got
usually it came through Japan.
Came through Japan.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, but, yeah.
Did you ever have a difficulty getting supplies?
No.
No. You always had plenty of anything you wanted?
Yeah, we had plenty, yeah, and there was no such shortage. Of course, when you got all the way up on the front where the fighting was done, I mean, then, you know, they had C rations and sometimes even K rations.
And is a K ration less than a C ration?
Yes, K ration is in a plastic box, like, and it's all covered with waxes and things like that. And it's the least that you'd want.
Is it true, or maybe you can tell me this isn't, that soldiers can only stay on K rations or C rations for so long because of the caloric intake?
Well, no, that's not the point. No, they could stay on it. You know, if that's all there was, they could stay on it for a long time.
Okay.
But we had set the diet up, but the diet was set for where you could take the food to them. See?
And how difficult was that, moving a mess hall?
Well, you didn't move it. You took the containers, were put into, they were around, we call them Marilite cans, and they were like a thermos. So there was a thermos round, maybe so tall, and there was 3 or 4 inserts that you fit down in there. So you could put 3 or 4 different things of food.
Oh, okay.
And that was then taken out, you know, to, to the front, sometimes as close as you could get, and you had a hot meal.
Interesting. Did your unit see many casualties? Did your engineers get in?
There was some when they built the bridge in the Hanwha, because that was under fire. I wasn't there at the time, but anyway, if you were in the unit afterwards, you still got the citation. And I don't know how many casualties, but there was some because they were building this bridge, you know.
Can you tell me a couple of your most memorable experiences? Anything that stands out that you think, oh, I'd never forget that?
Yeah, I will. I have one. In Korea, the Koreans would not eat pheasant. They figured it was a holy bird. So I had 2 of my cooks that were off duty. We had 12-gauge shotguns, and I had an M2 carbine. Now this M2 carbine, you put 15 rounds and taped it together, and 15 on the other side, so you could put it in. And we went into the hills, and I went into a draw, and I would walk in the draw, and I would fire crosshair, and the pheasants would come out over the top, and they could shoot them. we killed enough pheasants to feed the company pheasant. Not only was it memorable for us, but it was also very memorable for the men there.
Yeah. Did you fricassee them, or were they able
No,
to
they
be
were no. They were.
You could roast them.
Yeah, they were roasted. Yeah, and of course that gave us extra food. I had one of the cooks. He was a Jewish cook, but he made the best pizza you could get. And he made pizza, and the battalion commander, who was Italian, come up and he said, "Boy, this is really good." He wanted me to transfer to be his mess sergeant in there, but I said no, because I knew I was going to Busan to the food service specialist job, but I didn't tell him that this particular cook made it. I just said nothing. So.
Can you tell me about some of your ribbons that are on your shirt? You explained your Korean one on the right-hand side.
Okay, on this side here, now two of them, of course, you can see that look similar to the other one. It's also Korean. Another is the one with the 3 stars on it, our service stars, and that is also Korea. And then the one on the left is United Nations ribbon, and the other is a National Defense ribbon.
What's the significance of the one with the 3 service stars? What do the 3 service stars mean?
Well, it's the 3 service stars is, well, I don't really know how they would figure this out, but they put it on your papers as 3 service stars, and it was servicing while they were there. I mean, I really don't know. Breaking it down to,
How did you stay in touch with your family when you were in Korea and your new wife?
No, we wrote all the time.
Now, in World War II, they used V-mail. Could you just use regular mail service?
Yeah, but it was regular mail.
Regular mail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it was, now what you would send to me, it was APO, which stands for, post office or something for it. And sometimes I wouldn't get any mail for a while, and other times I'd get, 5 or 6 at one time. Mm-hmm. But she wrote every day, and I wrote about every day.
Did you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you save your letters?
Yeah, I saved some of them. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, one of the questions is, what was the food like? But I think that I
don't
need to ask you that.
No, well, I'll tell you, we had a mess sergeant in the unit that I was, where I was billeted. Even though I was a food specialist, I didn't have anything to do with the actual preparation anymore. My job was different than that. But this guy was fantastic. He was a master sergeant, been in the Army for a long time, and he did an excellent job. In fact, excuse me.
Go ahead.
I was going to say he even got the a Jeep and put it up on the rear wheels so that he could have I don't want to say it to spin it up.
A rotisserie?
Yeah, what he was doing was making ice cream.
Oh,
so you need something to turn it. So he just put the Jeep up there, and then he had this belt turning it. And so and also, well, we had 2 mess halls. There was one for privates up to corporal, and then to the left was the back part was NCOs, which were sergeants. The front part was an officer's mess, and there was a little short order kitchen in the middle of it. The back of it, across the back, was another tropical hut. They were tropical huts, and that was where the cooking and that was done. Well, between the 2 buildings, halfway down where you went into the NCO, he had set up tables in there, and so we had a beer garden. And so he even set it up that we had a little button. You push the button, and he had a piece of plywood at the bar. And the light would go on, and a waitress would come over to the window and say, and then sell it to you. And anyway.
It's like an episode of MASH.
Yeah, well, exactly, something like that. Yeah, in fact, I still enjoy watching that. In fact, the 8th on the patch that I have, not this one here, is the 8th Army, and that was 8th Army was in all of Korea was under the 8th Army jurisdiction.
You talked about a master sergeant who had been in the Army for a long time. Can you speak to that? Were there a lot of soldiers who had also been in World War II?
Oh, sure.
They just stayed in the Army, and then they were in Korea also. That was not uncommon.
That's not uncommon at all.
And then they had to serve in Korea also.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and some of them that were in World War II, and they were like non-com, sergeants. So, and then when they were in the National Guard, then when they went to Korea, then they became officers.
Oh, okay. Did they have to go through officer school,
Yes, they
training
did.
school?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Candidate school?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Did you ever feel pressure or stress?
Not really. I really had, no pressure or stress, and the fact is, the job I had was kind of nice.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had my own Jeep and driver, and the reason I had that is because I could drive it, but if you parked it and went someplace, why, the wheels would be gone. And, oh yes.
And who would take the wheel?
Oh yeah, anybody. There was a lot of pilferage going on. And let's face it, the people had nothing.
Yeah.
Busan itself had swollen from like 1 million up to like 6 or 7 million people, and
they were refugees.
Of course, they were refugees, from the north, etc. And food, food was at a premium.
Yeah.
And anything was at a premium. So if they could take the wheels off, or if it would stay there, they could take it all apart and sell it to somebody.
Sure.
So that was the reason. Not that it was a necessity.
Yeah.
On the part of a lot of people.
It wasn't just a luxury to have a driver.
Yeah, well, that's right. It was not a luxury. It was just, so.
Interesting. We often hear about our troops being entertained while they're overseas. Did you ever have any USO come and entertain you?
Yes, we had a Busan theater. Now, there was a squad of men that were billeted there, and they kept the theater clean and that. And I remember this man's name. He was Sergeant Strack. And they ate at our mess hall. But at night, it wasn't safe for them to be on the street. So he wanted some weenies. Yeah, I'm going back to this stuff again. And some sea ration stuff. And I said, sure, I can take care of that. Just send a Jeep up to the ration breakdown. And I said, and what have you got for me? And he said, well, the last, I believe, was 8 seats. Way as you get to the end of the balcony, you're almost to the stage. There was a cord across there. Those are your 8 seats. He said, now you don't have to stand in line, because the line would be back, around the corner, around the corner, around another corner. So I would just take some of my friends and knock on the back door and say, I'm here for Sergeant Strack, and we'd go up, and that's how we got. So, I saw some good USO shows.
Like what?
Oh, I remember Helen Traubel. I remember her because she had a booming voice, and she stood there on the stage with no mic or anything. And we had Hank Williams and
really.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They were good USO shows.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Yeah. And there was others, but I don't remember. I just remember these two.
That sounds fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever get time to go on leave?
No. Oh yeah. Oh wait. Of course, I went to Japan. Yeah. It was. We went to Japan for. I think we were there 5 days, and they flew us over, and went into Tokyo, Yokohama area, and while there, I purchased a lot of things that I had sent home. In fact, I purchased a service for 12, a Noritake. You might have heard of Noritake. A service for 12, Noritake, China. Total cost, buy and ship at home, $65. Oh. And my wife had lived in Canada for half the time, and then she moved to Illinois for the other. I was in Korea for 13 months, and she was living there in LaSalle, and working at the hospital, local hospital, and she said that she was taking care of one of the jewelers where they sold, jewelry store sold us taking care of his father, and she mentioned that, and he said, well, bring down a piece and let me see it. And he did, and he offered her like $300. She said, no, We still have it, but
I was going to ask you that if you still have
Oh
it.
yeah, I still have it. But one of the platters was broken, and to replace that platter, would have been probably, I don't know, $100 or more.
But it got all shipped home in one piece.
Mm-hmm.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's something.
Yeah. Right.
So what else did you guys do for 5 days on leave in Japan?
Well, we did a lot of shopping, and we did some drinking, obviously. Not obviously, but we did. I also bought another thing. It was a tea set, and it was made out of bone china. I don't remember what I paid for that, but it was about $30-some, and that was also shipped, and that arrived there. And I bought an album. The cover was a black lacquer type. Mm-hmm. And anyway, I had an opportunity, but I ran out of money. I could have bought cultured pearls, but I ran out of money and I couldn't buy that.
So it hadn't been very long since the end of World War II. What's your reception as an American GI in Japan at that time? How were you treated?
Well, really, we were accepted. I didn't really run into anything, but I kind of stayed with the people that were in the service, mm-hmm. the service clubs and things like that. I didn't venture out that much. Mm-hmm. So, it was.
So on leave, where are you billeted then? Where do you stay?
Well, they had an area for that, for billeting, Okay. And then they told you could shop, and they suggested going to certain places, and because you wouldn't get ripped off, so to speak, and so then they took us by bus to these various stores and where we could shop, and it was done well.
Did you get a lot of those leaves, or are you
only one?
13 months, 5 days and 13 months off?
Mm-hmm, yeah, only one.
Would you have had a 7-day work week then? I mean, those 13 months that you were in Korea, you're obviously working every single day.
Oh yes.
Yeah, you're not like Saturday and Sunday.
Well,
off.
yeah. Well, let me back off on that a bit. One of the things I also did was I was a drill sergeant. Okay, and every morning, Monday through Friday, I drilled it was like close order drill mm-hmm. for, I don't know, seems to me it was 15 or 20 minutes. And then we would then go and have breakfast after that. And I don't really remember too much what we did on Saturday, but it was kind of like a 5-day week.
It was.
Yeah, it was really. I'm trying to remember that. That's a good question. We ate, and that's about it, I guess. I really don't remember.
What did you think about your fellow officers and fellow soldiers? You talked a little bit about the major. But
yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, the warrant officer, chief warrant officer that I worked for, he was excellent. He was excellent. He was very good. His job was a food advisor, and then we had when I first went there, the unit was called the 409 Engineer Brigade, and we had a 1-star general that was commanding officer. Well, when he left and went back to the States, he took the unit name with him, and then we became the 44th Engineer Construction Group. And we had a full-blood colonel, a West Point man, and he was the commanding officer. He was a little stricter, but he liked his sergeants, and he liked the field grade officers, and so it was pretty good there. And
but you called him a full-bore colonel?
No, full bird. I mean, in other words,
okay.
A regular. You have a colonel that has like the chicken on her
okay.
there,
okay.
And then the lieutenant colonel has a round, silver type of.
And you called him a full bird.
What they wore looked like a chicken.
Okay.
So.
Do you recall your last day of service?
Yeah, I sure do. My last day of service, I was at Camp Carson, Colorado, and then we were released from Camp Carson. And what I couldn't understand is the people that were discharged, like if they lived on the East Coast, they were discharged at Fort Sheridan. Well, I was discharged at Camp Carson, and then had to had to take transportation to Illinois from there. I said, well, you know, why can't we just go to the other place? But that's not the way it worked.
Yeah. So this was 1953.
53, yeah.
53.
Yeah.
When in 1953?
That would have been in, we were delayed a month because they were repatriating prisoners. That would have been in October of 53.
And then did you continue on in the National Guard then?
No, my enlistment was up.
Oh, you were done.
But I was assigned to the what do I want to say? What's in that reserve? I was assigned to the reserves for some time after. I don't remember for how long. But I thought that while I was in, I joined the reserves again for the purpose of. I thought that that the war was going to break out in Taiwan. I really did, and so the company I was living in Peoria, Illinois at the time, and the company that I was in, they had a slot for a food advisor, which is a warrant officer, and I went and I joined for that reason to get my my warrant officer's degree. And because once you're called to active duty, if you're an officer, you stayed that way. If you went in as a sergeant first class, you may be called into active duty as a corporal. So it was for money-wise.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what did you do the weeks and the days when you got home?
Well, we went to Canada, and we went to Canada and visited with my wife's folks, and we headed north. And when we crossed the border in Michigan, he said, "Where are you going?" "We're going to Timmins." "Well, don't you know that Timmins was by the way, Timmins, Ontario was 550 miles north of Toronto. So you were in the Arctic watershed there, and don't you know there's snow up there?" And my wife said, "Of course, that's where I'm from." And so we went on and went up there, and I don't remember how, just stayed a week or so and come back, and then I went back to work.
And what did you do?
At that particular time, I was in the shoe business. I managed shoe stores for Kinney Shoes. They have, yeah, they now went out of business, but and I worked for them for a couple of years. But when they went 7 days a week, and 4 and 5 nights a week. Well, that wasn't when I went in, started to work for them. We didn't have that. So anyway, I left them, and I went to work for Johnson Wax in their marketing division because I had 2 years of marketing, and so I spent the majority of my work days were with Johnson Wax. Did
you ever take advantage of the GI Bill?
No, I didn't. I could have, but I didn't. No.
Did you make any close friendships when you were in the service?
Well, I had some friends that I met there from my hometown, but otherwise, not really. I mean, I ran into 2 different people that were from the same hometown. Of course, obviously there was friendships there. But other than that, no.
But you've stayed active in veterans organizations. You're very active in the VFW.
I'm a life member in the VFW and also in the American Legion. And also I'm in the Honor Guard, as you can see by the uniform I'm wearing. And we perform military rites.
So our last question for today, Mr. Kwatick, is can you tell me what freedom means to you?
Freedom means to be able to do the things you want to do and not worry about anything else. We have a freedom here is so much more than is in other countries. We know what's going on, in Iraq and places like that today, and so we should be very, very thankful that we are free.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.